In the halls of the British Museum, under the austere inventory, number 89115, there is a very small and, at first glance, unremarkable object made of fired clay. It is an ancient cylindrical seal, only about 2 inches long, found by archaeologists in the very south of Iraq during early expeditions. Carved into its hard surface is a complex scene that academic scholars have been copying and studying for many decades. At the very center of the composition is a deity seated within a closed, square outline, surrounded on all sides by streams of water. Fish swim around this geometrically precise outline, and the deity itself holds a strange measuring instrument firmly in its hands. I looked at it for a long time before allowing myself to ask the obvious question: why is this specific detail, this strictly delineated square of water, present on literally every similar seal from that historical period? If we travel 19 miles southwest of the modern city of Ur, we find ourselves amidst endless sand dunes. It is there, deep underground, that lie the ruins of the ancient city of Eridu, which the Sumerians themselves considered the very first city on Earth. In the very center of this city, archaeologists have unearthed a massive temple complex that conceals something completely extraordinary. Long and painstaking excavations at Eridu have revealed an incredible sequence of 17 superimposed cultural layers. Beneath each main temple, in each of these 17 layers, archaeologists invariably found the same architectural design. It was not simply a random pit for offerings or the usual deep foundation of a massive building. It was always a specially constructed and carefully insulated underground chamber, located directly beneath the main altar. In no other ancient city of Mesopotamia does such a continuous sequence of underground rooms simply exist. We find direct references to the concept of the Abzu on dozens of clay tablets from various temple libraries across Mesopotamia. Many of them are now safely stored in the archives of the University of Pennsylvania Museum and are fully accessible for independent study. These texts consistently link this site to the purposeful storage of highly important information and architectural blueprints. The Sumerians never spoke of some kind of ritual void. They always spoke of a functional and operational space. The physical characteristics of the discovered chambers match these ancient technical descriptions with astonishing precision. To date, archaeological expeditions have fully excavated and thoroughly documented 17 historical layers. In each of them, without a single exception, this protected chamber is present beneath the main altar. This clearly demonstrates the incredible continuity of building traditions, which has lasted uninterrupted for at least 7,000 years. People could radically change the style of pottery, the shape of bricks, the language they spoke, and their everyday tools. But they never abandoned the construction of a watertight chamber beneath the sanctuary of the god Enki. You can look at the original excavation drawings yourself and see this strict pattern with your own eyes. All these documents are publicly available and have long been published in the official archaeological reports of the expeditions. They show only the dry facts of field measurements, precise angles, and the building materials used. I invite you to join me right now as we walk through these ancient layers and look exclusively at the facts. Let's analyze exactly what they have been so carefully hiding in these rooms for 7 millennia. Academic science offers a quite concrete and down-to-earth explanation for the phenomenon of these underground chambers of Eridu. It is believed that they were simply symbolic reservoirs for fresh water, which were regularly used for ritual purposes. Temple priests could manually draw water from nearby canals to regularly wash the statues of the gods. As the local climate became increasingly arid, these reservoirs were made deeper and more sheltered from the sun. The bitumen waterproofing on the walls is explained by the simple technical necessity of retaining precious moisture in the porous, sandy soil. This interpretation is reasonable. In the extremely hot climate of Mesopotamia, fresh water was indeed the primary resource, which logically made it the center of worship. But it does not explain the following. If this is simply a reservoir, then why is there absolutely no trace of water erosion or salt deposits in Chamber 7, which has an enormous volume of over 2,100 cubic feet? Any artificial pool in this arid region inevitably leaves a thick mineral deposit on the walls within a very short time. Here, however, the thick layer of bitumen remained perfectly clean, without the slightest characteristic chemical markers of standing water. The complete absence of mineral deposits is just the very first physical inconsistency in this widely accepted theory. Similar ritual pools have been found in many other Mesopotamian cities, such as ancient Uruk or Nippur. They always had convenient gentle slopes, wide steps, and well-designed drainage systems for constant water renewal. In the isolated rooms of Eridu, there are absolutely no pipes, channels, or drainage holes for fluid circulation. These were completely enclosed spaces that the builders hermetically sealed off from the surrounding environment on all possible sides. The ritual use of stagnant water in such a closed, dark space would have led to its biological spoilage incredibly quickly. We must look at the physical facts provided by the excavated ground of the city of Eridu itself. Before us lie 17 rooms that are absolutely identical in function, built sequentially one directly above the other. They are perfectly insulated from moisture, show no signs of water storage, and are completely empty inside. The official academic version regarding simple ritual pools completely ignores these strict physical parameters in favor of the familiar concept. When physical evidence so clearly contradicts a theory, we must begin to ask additional complex questions. The ancient Sumerians themselves, in the texts that have come down to us, drew a very clear distinction between ordinary wells and the Abzu. For ordinary wells and agricultural canals, there was always a separate set of cuneiform symbols and specific terms. The Abzu, however, was always described by a special, complex compound sign denoting a very deep and securely hidden place. Modern translators often oversimplify this to the concept of groundwater, losing the original strict architectural context. But architecture cannot lie, and the fired bricks laid 7,000 years ago tell us something else. It is also worth noting that physical access to these underground chambers was always strictly limited. A detailed architectural plan clearly shows that only one incredibly narrow passage led from the altar to a steep descent. Ordinary townspeople never in their lives saw what took place in these sealed lower halls. The extensive collection of the Louvre Museum in Paris includes a small clay tablet known by the catalog number A06020. This important artifact was discovered at the very beginning of the 20th century during large-scale excavations in southern Mesopotamia. The tablet contains one of the earliest and most detailed lists of temple offices and the specific duties of priests. The text is neatly written in cuneiform and is reliably dated to approximately the 3rd millennium BCE. Physically, it is a very small piece of hard-fired clay weighing only about 2 pounds. Mainstream academic scholarship confidently asserts that this text describes standard and routine religious titles. Scholars typically translate one of the key terms in this long list as priest who purifies water. This position is considered extremely minor and associated exclusively with preparing temple pools for ceremonies. In the context of the Temple of Enki, who was the god of fresh waters, the presence of such a specialist seems quite natural and expected. Therefore, historians generally pay absolutely no special attention to this title in their scholarly research. This interpretation is logical within the strict framework of the generally accepted model of simple ritual service in ancient temples. The regular washing of statues and the maintenance of the purity of sacred water bodies was indeed a routine part of all ancient cults. But in the original Sumerian text, this specific term is rendered as Abgal or Apkalu in the later Akkadian. If we look closely at the literal translation, it means the great man of Abzu. Nowhere in the very root of this ancient word is there any indication of cleansing or washing anything. We can easily compare this unusual structure to the later great libraries of the Assyrian kings. In the famous city of Nineveh, the rooms for storing clay tablets also had walls that underwent special chemical treatment. The only difference is that the vast libraries of Nineveh were located above ground, not deep underground. Placing the archive underground ensured an incredibly stable temperature of around 65 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. These are absolutely ideal climatic conditions for the long-term storage of fragile materials in a very hot climate. French archaeologists who have studied the Louvre tablet in detail note the mathematical precision of Sumerian terminology. Ancient scribes never confused simple terms denoting water with terms denoting deep knowledge. When they wrote about the great people of Abzu, they always used symbols firmly associated with wisdom. Symbols associated with ordinary domestic water were used exclusively to describe irrigation and agricultural canals. The confusion of these two distinct concepts occurred much later, exclusively in the works of modern translators. A physical artifact housed in the Louvre provides us with a direct key to understanding this entire strange architecture. It documents the existence of a special caste of people in the city who worked continuously in these underground chambers. Their daily work was directly related to managing information that was physically located in the Abzu. In the next section, we will look at a completely different physical clue found by archaeologists inside the chamber itself. This unique discovery further distances us from the theory of a conventional water reservoir. The University of Pennsylvania Museum carefully preserves a cylindrical seal with the official catalog number B1623. It was successfully excavated in the early 20th century and is accurately dated to the Akkadian historical period. It is a very small stone cylinder, about 1.5 inches long, on which a master craftsman carved a complex scene. When rolled over a piece of wet clay, this seal leaves an incredibly detailed impression depicting the god Enki. The deity is shown emerging from a square structure, which all researchers unequivocally identify as an Abzu. Traditional academic archaeology views this seal simply as a typical mythological motif. Scholars believe that the square structure symbolizes the god's mythical water palace at the very bottom of the ocean. The streams emanating from the deity's shoulders are conventionally interpreted as the life-giving rivers Tigris and Euphrates. In this context, the entire image is viewed simply as a naive allegory of fertility and the divine power of nature. The seal is perceived exclusively as a religious talisman, having absolutely no connection to real architecture. The material from which this seal, B1623, is made also deserves the closest attention. It is incredibly hard diorite, a stone that is absolutely not found in the sedimentary rocks of southern Iraq. The nearest known deposits of this mineral are located at a vast distance of over 400 miles from Eridu. The client spent a vast amount of money to bring this material and hire a highly skilled craftsman for the carving. Such a significant investment clearly speaks to the incredible importance of the information recorded on this small cylinder. The official reports of the University of Pennsylvania expedition contain a very interesting statistical detail. Similar diorite seals bearing the image of an Abzu were found exclusively in major administrative buildings, not in the homes of ordinary people. They were always used to authenticate only documents of special state or supreme temple importance. The symbol of this underground chamber served as an absolute seal of quality and authenticity for the city's highest leadership. This fully confirms the high administrative and not merely mystical status of this underground site. A literal translation of ancient Sumerian hymns to the god Enki definitively clarifies this administrative function. One such hymn explicitly states, "He has securely placed the measuring cord in the Abzu." Another surviving text reads, "The precise counting stones are kept in complete safety in his deep house." These direct quotations clearly indicate the permanent storage of standards of weights and measures in these chambers. The underground chamber was an ancient counterpart to a modern standards bureau, protected from any possible external influences. In the detailed reports of the British excavations at Eridu from 1948, there is a very strange observation concerning Layer 8. Archaeologists meticulously documented the process by which the ancient builders sealed off the old chamber before constructing a new one. Inside this chamber, neither fragments of old furniture nor ordinary construction debris were found. The entire room, with a volume of over 1,500 cubic feet, was filled to the brim with absolutely clean sand. This sand had a completely uniform structure and contained not even microscopic traces of ordinary urban dirt. The prevailing theory interprets this remarkable fact exclusively as an element of ritual purification of the space. Historians suggest that the sand symbolized primordial purity prior to a large-scale renovation of the temple complex. Bringing absolutely pure material from the deep desert was a way to express the highest reverence for the deity of this place. Such a practice is indeed sometimes found in some other ancient cultures of the Middle East. Therefore, researchers generally do not look for any deep technical meaning in this incredibly labor-intensive action. This position makes sense, as religions often use physical purity as an accessible metaphor for spiritual purity. But it does not explain the unique physical and chemical properties of this particular sand at all. Laboratory analysis showed that all the sand had been thoroughly washed and sifted to completely remove organic compounds. To fill the entire vast volume of the room, it was necessary to transport and process approximately 150,000 pounds of this material. This represents a colossal logistical effort that goes far beyond a simple symbolic gesture. The ancient builders did not simply fill the chamber, they created an incredibly dense, shock-absorbing cushion. A literal translation of construction texts from that time contains the term ki-sikil, meaning pure place. But this very same term was used in recipes for creating molds for precision metal casting. Sifted sand, free of even the slightest impurities, possesses unique physical properties for absorbing vibrations and moisture. By filling the chamber with this material, the engineers ensured ideal stabilization of the foundation for the new, massive temple. Ancient texts describing the reconstruction of temples constantly use the expression, "preserve the roots of the Abzu." A literal translation of this term directly emphasizes the idea of continuity and the physical connection between the layers. Each new level literally rested on a carefully preserved capsule from the previous stage of construction. The result was an entire hidden tower of 17 sealed rooms extending incredibly deep underground. This is an absolute architectural metaphor for deep drilling or rooting into geological strata. We must seriously ask ourselves where the early Sumerians acquired such engineering knowledge. The ability to accurately calculate soil pressure and material resistance requires centuries of continuous practice. However, in Eridu, all these technologies appear fully formed in the very earliest layers known to us. The chambers grow in size from 2 feet to large halls, but the engineering principles remain absolutely unchanged. Someone taught them these principles long before the very first clay brick was laid. You can find precise tables of the density of building materials from that time in any specialized library. Calculations by modern British engineers confirm that the use of unwashed sand would inevitably have led to the building's subsidence. The ancient craftsmen knew this perfectly well and spared no effort in preparing the correct aggregate. This brings us right up to the most mysterious part of the entire vast complex in Eridu. We need to look into those layers that remain completely hidden from the eyes of researchers to this day. In 2018, an independent international team of researchers conducted a detailed ground-penetrating radar scan of the Eridu site. Modern equipment allowed them to look deep beneath the 17th layer, the lowest of the temple's excavated layers. For decades, it was believed that beneath this layer lay only virgin soil, never touched by human hands. However, the scanners detected incredibly clear geometric anomalies at a depth of several dozen feet below that. This data directly indicates the presence of at least 2 older levels of underground chambers. Mainstream science treats this radar data with extreme caution. Scientists suggest that these could be entirely natural geological formations or voids in the rock. Groundwater often erodes karst caves, which can appear on a radar screen as smooth rooms. Without physical excavations, the academic community categorically refuses to recognize these anomalies as man-made structures. Therefore, in official reference works, the history of Eridu still begins exclusively with the 17th layer. This skepticism is entirely justified, as ground-penetrating radar provides only indirect data that requires verification by an archaeologist's shovel. But it does not at all explain the incredible mathematical precision of the location of these deep anomalies. The signatures on the radar screen lie precisely on a single, strictly vertical axis with the 17 chambers above. The probability that a natural cave formed exactly beneath the center of the altar is statistically equal to absolute zero. Moreover, the lower chambers have the exact same 2:3 proportions as the upper halls. The archives of the Berlin Museum of the Near East contain unpublished notes by the first German explorers of the region. As far back as the 19th century, they meticulously recorded local legends about the iron root of the city of Eridu. Local Bedouins sincerely believed that an object was buried beneath the ruins, one that absolutely must not be dug up. For a long time, these tales were considered mere folklore with absolutely no scientific value. But today, radar shows a physical object exactly where these ancient legends point. If there really are 2 more hidden layers there, this pushes the city's founding date back by millennia. This means that someone was building complex geometric chambers long before the emergence of Sumerian civilization. This completely overturns the established chronology of the development of construction technologies in the Middle East. Perhaps this is precisely why academic archaeologists are in no hurry to begin costly, deep excavations in this area. It is much safer to study the upper layers, which fit perfectly into the familiar historical paradigm. You can access the public reports on the ground-penetrating radar scans and see these graphs for yourself. There is absolutely no mysticism there, only raw data on the reflection of electromagnetic waves from a dense medium. Deep beneath 17 layers of history lies something unmistakably geometrically regular and artificial. Now, we must piece all these separate fragments together and look at the big picture. What we will clearly see challenges everything we were taught in history class. Let's return to that very small clay seal from the British Museum with which we began. To that very modest 2-inch long cylinder with inventory number 89115. Now you see the god Enki seated inside the square with entirely new eyes. This is no longer just a naive drawing by an ancient artist struggling to depict a myth. It is an absolutely precise diagram of a secure underground vault surrounded by a thick layer of waterproofing. We have passed through 17 layers of history, descending deeper and deeper into the scorching sands of Eridu. We have clearly seen how a tiny 2-foot chamber transformed into a massive 12 by 18-foot hall. We examined hundreds of thousands of pounds of pure sand, bearing the colossal pressure of stone walls. We read literal translations of texts that speak directly of the guardians of ancient data, and we saw radar images of what remains hidden at the most incredible depths. Official science looks at this and sees an ordinary ritual water reservoir. I look and see an engineering time capsule, built to protect critically important information. Maybe that's a far-fetched conclusion. Maybe that's exactly what it looks like. In any case, physical facts remain facts, and they won't disappear just because we close our eyes to them. The history of Eridu is not just a story about how people built temples out of clay and bitumen. It is an incredible story of an obsession with preserving something infinitely valuable for 7,000 years. Generation after generation, empire after empire, they continued with maniacal persistence to guard this spot on the map. They poured unimaginable resources into waterproofing a room that always remained completely empty. Empty only to those who did not know how to read the data matrices hidden inside. The choice to classify before researching has always been the easiest path for academic science. It is much easier to label an incomprehensible structure a cult object than to calculate its load-bearing capacity. Translating a word as plumber is much more reassuring than acknowledging the existence of ancient engineer archivists. But true archaeology begins precisely where convenient explanations end. It begins with measuring the thickness of the bitumen and chemically analyzing the density of the sand in the foundation. You now know exactly what to look for when visiting museums and reading historical articles. You know the secret code that unlocks the heavy doors to real, rigorously documented knowledge. The words documented, translated, and awaiting a response are your main tools in this investigation. Don't take any theory at face value until you personally verify the physical parameters of the findings. Demand numbers, coordinates, and exact dimensions, because geometry simply cannot lie. Excavations in Iraq are still ongoing, and one day someone is bound to reach the 18th layer. They will carefully peel away the millennia-old shell of compacted clay and see what lies hidden within. Perhaps they will find there the very original object that sparked this endless construction. Or perhaps they will find only an empty chamber, patiently awaiting new custodians. The main thing is that by that time, we are fully prepared to ask the right questions. Our journey to Mesopotamia has come to an end, but the investigation itself is just beginning. There are hundreds of such anomalies in the world, waiting for an honest and very careful look. From the underground cities of Cappadocia to the colossal megaliths of South America, everywhere has its inconsistencies. We will continue to unravel them layer by layer, relying solely on strictly measurable facts, because the question of our past remains open and awaits its explorer. Remember the rule of the small object, which we used so successfully today. Huge mysteries are always hidden in tiny details that seem completely insignificant at first glance. In an inconspicuous line of cuneiform text, or in the chemical composition of the sand beneath an old foundation. Learn to see these details, and you will see what others stubbornly fail to notice. You will cease to be a blind consumer of ready-made and convenient historical concepts. The legacy of Eridu lives on in catalogs, on dusty shelves, and deep within the earth. The evidence hasn't vanished. It's simply waiting for someone to take a close look. Every dimension and every artifact is documented in the reports of the University of Pennsylvania and British Museum expeditions. And right now, in the silence of the exhibition hall, lies the key to this entire mystery.